republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the county's work session, and I believe the sheriff is the first one on the agenda.
All right, you want me to, I can just go over it, or I can simply answer questions that you have, or like I say, I can touch bases on some of our more major increases that we've had going forward. I'll leave it up to you what you'd like to see done here.
Maybe any major increases, any
Yeah.
personnel items?
Yeah, I'll touch bases like, we have, you know, as you'll see, right off the bat, our officer TZD grant, there's an additional $101,000 in there that reflects a full year of, revenue for our TZD officer. That totally covers the cost of, the officer that's doing the TZD work. So when you see large numbers, you know, $101,000 extra, you kinda wonder what that
That was once
is.
for
but-
3 years that we get paid
Yeah.
back for it? Okay.
Yep. For some of the expenses, one number that will jump out at you will be the vehicle leases, you know, it went from 159 to 262, you know, a big increase, but what happens, the more vehicles that get rotated out of the vehicles that we own and then flopped into lease vehicles, the lease payments go up. So that's simply what's happening. For the most part, just about every vehicle that we have now are lease vehicles. So,
So are they gonna be able to replace those next year, do you think? Cause you know, like the highway's outrightly buying.
yeah,
Because they can't get vehicles, so you're still able
Right.
to get vehicles for the lease.
well, yes and no, we're getting vehicles that we don't want, you know, that are not what we really want, no. You know, here, a couple months ago, there was a lot, I think out in Boston, or the East Coast someplace, that had like 500, SUV police vehicles sitting there. 500, we can't even get 4, but some lot wholesaler gets 500 from Ford. I mean, it was ridiculous, so we ended up having to take, we took 4 of those, but they're not equipped like what we wanted, but it's better than walking, put it that way. We took what we get, what you get.
Could
So-
you have bought those? Not those, but could you have gone and
We-
bought?
Yeah, we could have bought them, but we did the lease instead, you know, so we didn't have to fork out, you know, $200,000, you know, for that. So instead we're leasing, like everything else.
Is this something though that, because the highway's gone, Jeff, to, you know, actually purchasing? Do we wanna look at doing a purchase instead of leasing if the department can't get what they need?
Yeah, we're still, I mean, the highway's doing a combination.
Yes,
They're
they
doing
are.
a combination. So they're still leasing when they can and buying when they have gaps. And I've talked with Scott about the same thing, who's managing your fleet and in your lease arrangements. And they know that they have the same flexibility, but they're finding ways to make these work. And in the long run, I think that if we can get through this supply thing, it'll still be better for us. So yeah, the fact that lease up, I was kinda under the impression that we were leased up almost 100%. We're not leased up 100%?
No, almost. There might be one other vehicle, but starting for next year, it probably is every single one.
Okay.
So,
And then when you get to a certain point, then that number stabilizes.
yep.
It's as you're adding them to the fleet. So I'll double check the dashboard with Scott and take a look at those things, cause I've worked with the enterprise lease up program before.
So then my other question is then, do you have money in your budget to upgrade whatever needs to be done? Or are you just making do with the equipment they have, or how is that working?
No, we budget for equipment as well.
Right, but
Yeah.
you said that it wasn't what you wanted, so
Well,
whatever.
no,
you-
when I say that, it's maybe not the engine that we want.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, or the,
You got the vehicle, but not the interceptor package.
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, not the package that we would like.
Okay,
Like, for example, these cars would be better suited for in town, you know, where you're maybe low geared, you know, good low end speed, but not the best on the open highway, put it that way. There's just a few things that we wouldn't have picked. So, yeah. All right. You know, the ERU team, supplies and equipment, you know, took a good jump from 3,000 to 15,000. You know, we have budgeted for a gas deployment for MRAP. That's a $10,000 expenditure. It's purely a safety factor for the ERU team. And we've had to put gas, you know, into a house. Well, instead of having an individual walk up there and put it in there, we can deploy that from the MRAP. It's completely a safety issue. Down a little bit for equipment, you know, purchases. There was a jump. It went from 225 to 286. We have some budgeted issues there. You know, part of that is squad equipment, which was 75,000. You know, we're going to buy some tasers this year, which led to a $5,000 jump. You know, the watch guard, you know, our body camera lease, and the squad camera lease as part of that. So that's a $56,000 annual lease. And then we also, I believe, have some radios in there for 150,000. So that's where that, you know, jump, you know, took as well. So. Next item went for equipment purchases for boat and water, for example. For 23, we had 5,000. Well, we budgeted for to purchase a vehicle, which is offset by a $25,000 grant. So it looks like a huge jump, but like I say, it's a $25,000 grant, not a pickup. We're going to buy a boat. Okay, we're gonna upgrade one of the boats and get rid of it. So it shows an expenditure, but again, it's offset by the grant from the state.
Yeah, didn't you just get the pickup from?
We bought a used pickup, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. So this is for a boat. Yep. For corrections, communications, for the prisoner conveyance, you know, we had an increase there, which doubled actually. It's the DOC paying us to transport people to prison. And the reason that went up for revenue, you know, so drastically is we have a lot of people that we take to prison. And the DOC pays us to do that. So there was a nice increase there. It's only $5,000, but at least it didn't double, you know, in the negative for us, so.
Has the rate per prisoner increased any from the Board of Prisoners?
No, it's been the same. But you know, we got an increase, I think, 2 years ago, so, yeah. They don't take a jump unless they truly have to, so. They will again, but it might take a while. Let's see. All right, communications, corrections, equipment purchases. This was a big one, but we have something that is gonna help us liability-wise. For 23, we had budgeted 61,000, and for next year, we are budgeting 232,500. The purpose there, and we actually were hoping to use some opioid dollars, and that was our plan, but it sounds like that got allocated somewhere else in the county. But we're looking to buy a body scanner for the jail. And we have had so many prisoners coming into the jail that have been hiding fentanyl on them in different places on or inside of their body, to be a little bit more specific, that you can't find them in a pat-down search. You know, the only way you could find that is in a body cavity search, and you can't do that. Without a reason, you cannot do that. So these people are smuggling in fentanyl, and people are going to the emergency room. We've been having to use Narcan multiple times with our inmates because they're going unconscious. And so this is a huge thing. It's a very expensive item. It's roughly $180,000, but it's a body scan that when prisoners come into the jail, they will go through the scanner and they can see if they're hiding anything inside of their body.
So would you have to take them then to the doctor?
Oh yeah, they go by ambulance to the emergency room.
But, I mean, if you find something inside their body.
Oh, yes, then we would, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They would go there and get it removed, absolutely, yeah. But I'm telling you, it's a huge liability issue that we're looking at, and, you know, not to mention, you know, they're giving it to other prisoners, you know, other inmates throughout the jail, and all of a sudden you get the majority of a certain pod being higher than a kite, and, it's a bad deal, so.
What's the footprint of this piece of equipment?
You know, there was a couple of different models, but I wanna say it's roughly, maybe 6 foot by 6 foot. Roughly.
Does it make sense to include it in the planned improvements in that area? Or is it a piece of equipment like a copier that can be purchased and picked up and moved?
Oh, boy. I don't know are they bolted to the floor? That I couldn't tell you. But I have to believe that you can, that they have to be somewhat
Yep.
portable.
I'm just thinking about options
Yeah,
for including that and paying for that if that's something that we need, and if we do it out of cash, or if we do it wrapped up into a project. And, you know, we're still on track for this fall to be considering, engaging an architect to develop plans for that project.
well, yeah, and here's the thing, you know, when you mention that, there would obviously be a specific place that you'd wanna put it. So, in the upcoming remodel, if that does go through for the jail, that would make sense to have that
It would be,
in an intake.
it'd be 18 or 24 months before you'd have it then, so that's an option as well.
So isn't the county responsible for every time you take somebody to the emergency room?
Yes.
So if you offset part of this 180,000 with the staff time and the medical time, or medical bill,
Yeah, we pay the whole bill.
You might save on the ambulance and stuff, but you're still paying for the staff time, whether they're driving to the hospital or not.
Yeah, staff time, in all reality, and the only difference would be if somebody is staying long-term, you have to hire somebody to stay in the hospital with them. That would be the only difference.
okay.
Typically on an opioid overdose, they're not typically in the hospital that long. They basically get treated, whether they flush their system or not, I don't know exactly what they do to them, but then they get released, you know, back into our jail, so. I would say wages wise, yeah, probably not much of a factor that way. We have had to send people to Fargo where we're putting somebody on them for an extended period of time, and that does get expensive doing it that way.
I think part of this process too is you look at Corey's budget, and I'm sure others' budgets will have similar things, but part of our goal with doing a capital improvement plan and willing to spend $600,000 a year on current capital is you look at these capital items and pull them all together and prioritize which ones you want to do for the year. Pretty hard when you start to do more than the $600,000 we allocate unless you get really good, they're budget wreckers. I mean, they really are. I understand the need and stuff, but we have to look at all of it across all departments and prioritize which ones are the most important. And I would agree with Jeff's concern a little bit. I would be very curious on how this would integrate into the current space, because I don't want to spend 3 or 5 years from now another $50,000 to remove it.
No,
Or remodel.
and I can certainly find out more from my jail administrator on the details of it. Maybe it's on wheels, you know, they have these at airports and stuff. So maybe they are on wheels and can be easily moved. I'm not real familiar with these, they have one in Beltrami, I know.
We will have that list of capital that we're intending to offset with the annual capital funds. This would probably be on that list. We'll have all of that before we get to the point of you having to approve a preliminary levy. The opioid funds have not been allocated, but we're gonna have a conversation with Marley and Public Health and Brian, I think next week. Probably include somebody from Corey's office in that conversation, and decide what kind of process we're gonna go through to actually make a recommendation how to use those funds, because it hasn't been done yet. We know we wanna deal with mental health, We know what we want to do with impacts from opioid, but we haven't really made a determination. We don't have as much money as other people do coming in. As I understand it, we have about $250,000 in the bank, and we're on line to receive about $45,000 a year. And you guys know that doesn't go very far. So, we haven't allocated it. It's one of the considerations. We'll have recommendations on that upcoming. But I will also have, in the letter that I sent you, I said these capital expenses in 201 and 250 are eligible to put into that, to use those funds against to buy them down. There's also the opportunity, we could look at this year's spending, and if we find that we have room, we could possibly purchase some of those things this year. So we'll have more on that. This page is gonna change quite a bit, but it's not gonna change without a conversation with Corey and Scott and Joe too. We'll need Joe's conversation on that.
The unfortunate thing, you know, for public safety is these things that we buy are typically very expensive. They're overpriced because they're such a designated type of, you know, piece of equipment, and, you know, 180,000 just seems, you know, crazy for, you know, for what you use it for. But when you look at the liability thing, you know, I have to weigh, you know, what we're gonna, you know, priorities, you know, and we did kind of look at this as being something that we wanted to put in the budget, you know, for a potential, you know, purchase, because it's that big of a deal. It truly is.
And this would just be for scanning, people that are arrested.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so we got to tour the sheriff's department there. Do you have an idea where this would go if you got one currently?
Yep, it's like, would be back like in our booking area,
Okay.
you know, so you.
And that was tight already.
It is, yeah. And, you know, you come in with in the garage, you know, you drive in, you take your prisoner out, you come in through the next set of doors, and it would be someplace in that general area,
Okay.
you know, where they would pass through there and then continue on through the booking process.
I was thinking if it was 6 by 6.
Yeah,
You'd almost
Well-
have to have it lined up with the door, so you had to walk through it to get into the rest of it.
and honestly, maybe that is, you know, what we would do with it. You know, part of a, you know, go through the hallway thing and you
Yeah.
gotta pass through here. That certainly could be the case. Yeah.
Because like I say, I know how tight it is. In my mind's eye, I'm just trying to think,
Yeah,
where would it go?
yep, I know.
That's a secondary problem, is we realize we don't have a lot of space in that area. So it might be better to plan for it than it would be to, but it's a conversation, and we have to actually go look at it.
Yep, and nothing says we couldn't put it in the garage.
I was just gonna say
So
that.
you pass through that and then go through the door. I don't know. I don't wanna speak
Yeah.
for that, so.
Okay. Thank
So, my commentary is not applicable to this, but I just found this out at our Prime West meeting on Thursday, that they are now giving out fentanyl strips, and they haven't had a lot of requests from the sheriff's department. And it seems like kind of an oxymoron, because you actually wouldn't use them so much in your department as you would give to people that are using, and they're actually testing the fentanyl before they take it.
That's what I was gonna ask, what is a fentanyl strip?
Yeah, it tells whether it's, if there's enough in there to kill you or not, so they make a decision about if they're gonna take it or they're gonna
So
buy
you-
another one.
So they would test probably any drug with
I don't know,
that.
they're called fentanyl strips.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with them at all.
Yeah, if you're interested at all, I can give you contact with Prime West, because we had a discussion that it's used mostly on the reservation because they've asked for them, but they're available to sheriff's departments if you would so desire them.
Yeah, I'd be interested, just mostly for I would like to see what they are.
I'll copy
Just-
you on an email with
Yeah,
Jim,
if you
and you
could.
guys can have a
Yeah,
conversation.
please. Yeah, I'd be curious to see if that would make sense for us.
Okay.
Okay, next would be like in STS, I wanna go over, for, purchases of some equipment. As you can see, we budgeted,
Sorry, before you go
Yep.
on, I did have one question here, and it's actually circled here, about the regular and part-time wages.
yep,
No, maybe that was,
On the that's got the notations by it?
Well, the 124,941, that must just be is that a position?
Is this for corrections, or which one are we talking?
Communication corrections, yes.
Page 51.
Thank you. Yep. And then salary overtime, see right below that, so are you tying the two together? You want to hire someone and then the overtime will go down? I'm just trying to understand what you're asking for there.
You know, let me find it here.
What were the two numbers?
Page 51,
Yeah,
it goes
mine's different.
salaries regular and then salary overtime. There's actually a notation there, Jeff.
6103 and 6105 in
Yep.
that area.
Okay, so which specific question are you asking?
Okay, so 6103 has $124,945 written by it, and then the salary overtime, 6106. In 2022, you spent almost 297,000, but in actual, this year you spent 168, although the year isn't done. So are you thinking you're gonna end up pretty close to where it was? Or is it a reflection of you're trying to add somebody for next year?
You know, my numbers are different. I know we had some updated numbers when there was, I think, a mistake made when HR figured, you know, some wages.
Okay,
I show, like, well, let's look at part-time wages, for example. For 23 actual, I show 174.
oh,
So here, specifically though, which one are you wondering about?
well, on your sheet, does it show 124,945 written in with a 6.5%? Or is that only on ours?
That's mine.
That's yours.
So that's 124,000 more than the previous year,
Okay,
which is a 6.5% increase.
increase, okay, I got it.
Which makes sense given
This
the
is-
cost of living
This
increase.
is what they're looking at.
Okay,
Okay,
Is
thank
four
you.
percent. So
Okay.
I was, I'm like, wow, how does she have that number? Oh yeah, because we copied mine.
okay, so never mind.
All right,
So it's the 2,069,000
Yep.
for regular wages. And that note is for me to simply calculate how much of the increase in the public safety budget was due to the cost of living
Cost of living,
increases
okay.
in wages.
All right, thank you.
So one more question on that. So,
Okay.
What's driving the overtime being higher than you budgeted the last 2 years? Is that because you can't fill the part-time positions?
well, that's been a lot of it, and, you know, additional shifts, different things come up, yeah, and part of it, you know, when we're down people, you know, even if you're down somebody just for a few weeks and while you're trying to fill a shift, absolutely, so then you're paying overtime.
So I'm looking at this and we're still budgeting the same amount as the previous 2 years. How accurate is that gonna be?
Well, it all depends on, you know, I guess we're probably planning on having adequate numbers, you know? You know, budgets are kind of a coin toss, you know, for your predictions, whether it's the price of gas to how much overtime you think you're gonna have. And a lot of it, you plan on, what did we use this year? So you kind of plan, you know, accordingly as well. And with overtime, if you think, well, we're up to staff, you know, maybe we won't have as much OT to go through, you know, filling vacant shifts.
I guess my point is, you know, if it's likely that we're gonna struggle filling the part-time positions, then, maybe we should be budgeting less in part-time positions and more in overtime, if that's likely to be the case. Versus assuming we're gonna fill all I know that's what you wanna do.
Yep. Well, we will be full with our full-timers. We have one to go, just replacing our drug task force officer. So then we will be full on full-time people. The part-time, you know, staff, yeah, we could use one more good, solid, you know, part-timer. And sometimes that's easier.
Do you see
said
that
than
getting easier to fill, or is it staying?
you just need the right person, you know, that can come along and, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to be hopeful, but that doesn't always work that way.
The challenge is if you look at 22 and 23 actuals, we're at budget, we're slightly over budget on regular and 22
Yeah.
slightly under in part-time, and then still way over in overtime. So we need to make sure we've got this mix right, so that we're seeing an actual number, and I just asked, Jean and her staff to give me an update on how they're estimating those numbers. And that estimate in this case is in consultation with Corey's staff. So we have a conversation about that. But you're right, if we've got part-time at 500,000 and overtime at 60, and that's the wrong mix, that should be corrected just for estimating purposes. And Corey's right too. You don't know what's gonna happen throughout the course of the year relative to vacancies. But the history actually shows that the first two numbers are probably right, and it's the third one that's estimated low. And then we have to have a conversation about if we're paying that much overtime, do we have the right number of staff for the shifts if we're doing, now, there's a lot of boat and water grants. Those are extra hours, right? So those are always paid at overtime.
Yep.
So a lot of the grant type positions are paid at that. We need to do a little, that's not in here, that's in another number, but,
TZD, you know, ATV shifts, a lot of that is all overtime.
but
And
we have to take a closer look at those three numbers for 201 and 250 and make sure that they're correct.
you know, what you can't plan on is, you know, people, staff going out on maternity or paternity leave, an injury. I had a deputy that snapped his Achilles tendon. Well, you know how long he's out for, and that's, you know, you work trying to fill his shifts with, you know, part-time people, but there's overtime in the mix there too, so it is really hard to, you know, differentiate, you know, is this gonna be, are we gonna be able to cover with part-time people, or is it gonna be overtime? It's tough, and it's a guessing game, it is.
So as I've seen openings come through for positions, have you been able to fill those fairly quickly?
Yeah, for the most part, you know, it just depends on what the position is. You know, the one that I'm crossing my fingers on now, cause it's a very specific, you know, position, is our drug task force officer. You know, we just posted that a few days ago, and, that's a really important position. It's not just, you know, just because you have you know, you're eligible to be an officer, you know, doesn't mean that you qualify for it. You know, it's really a select type of, person that we need for that, so. I'm hoping we can find the right person, so, yeah. All right, going back to the STS, for expenditures, you know, for equipment purchases, we went from budgeting $12,000 to 82 for next year, and that's simply, we're gonna buy a truck. But I wanna tell you something that's really skewed, because it looks like, you know, there's a bunch more, you know, levy dollars coming into play, but it's zero levy dollars that will come completely out of donated, you know, dollars, which is in a separate designated fund, which doesn't really reflect in a budget. So it's a big jump, but again, there's no additional cost whatsoever, you know, and like I say, that's
That much donations?
yeah, we have a lot of money in donations,
Is,
That's a huge increase though.
yeah.
no, it's not, there's a fund balance in that.
Yeah, it's a fund
There's
balance.
a fund
restricted
balance in that
funds
account.
already.
It, yeah, we don't
okay.
take in that much in a year, but just over year
Oh,
to
it's
year
been
to year.
accumulated.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, that's a fund that doesn't go away. It sits there, and we're able to buy any equipment, and supplies that STS uses, and it's a great thing when it comes time, you know, for, say, a vehicle, which is very expensive, or mowers, you know, zero-turn mowers are expensive, and so
Any
that's,
idea what the balance is right now?
you know, I'm just gonna throw out there, there's probably, it's over 100,000.
Oh,
I wanna say maybe 130, I'm just guessing at that, but it's,
Hey, was that in the last board meeting you sent out the restricted funds, or was it the one before?
If you have that with you,
Yeah.
it would be on that sheet.
Okay,
So,
Yeah.
may I ask a question? If the truck is going to be paid for out of the STS donations, is it appropriate to have it budgeted then? Or should we budget for that revenue to come in as well?
it's kinda what I thought, because it's really a one-sided thing, I completely agree.
That was gonna be my next question, is it accounted for in the summary here?
It's
Because if
not,
it's coming out
it's
of
not, because I haven't gone through that list and pulled
Yeah.
those items out, and this is,
Counted as fund balance being used.
truthfully, this is one of those things, if we've got current funds and you can find a truck, bring it to the board and buy it this year and don't put it in the budget. That's the cleanest way. We don't budget revenue, we don't budget expense.
Totally the cleanest way, you're right.
And we can get that 6.8 down.
0.5%.
No,
Not quite, but.
it won't, but it'll get us closer to that gap that we have to get to 6.8.
We still
Oh,
got,
yeah,
yeah.
oh, yeah,
Get to the- yeah, that's right.
624,000 gap.
The pre 6.8, yeah.
So you can pull that.
So.
Yeah, I can do that easily.
So I'm making a list of notes to talk to Corey and Scott
Okay.
about, because their list of capital is usually, pretty easy to articulate. We just didn't get this till late last week, so we didn't have a chance to have this conversation.
Do you want me to run and look?
No, I have it up here, so it would be, what's it under?
STS donations?
$116,018.
So the easier thing to do with this one is pull it out of 24 planning, if it's a current need, buy it out of that fund balance. So we'll have to talk about that and make some adjustments to this.
Speaking of that, is there anything in your conceal and carry funds, is there anything in your budget that would qualify for some of that conceal and carry money? Because that fund gets quite large.
It does, yeah. I mean, you know, that's something that it's hard to eat up big chunks of that money.
184,000's in
And
there
it
now.
just keeps growing is my point. At some point, you know, I don't know where the other counties and what they're doing, but I imagine they're in the same boat. Somebody needs to be lobbying this
Yeah.
state legislators on this, because this fund just keeps growing and it's such a limited things you can spend it on, and it's just gonna keep growing.
You know, part of it is, and we've been very lucky here because we're very careful, but part of that, you need a reserve to cover any legal costs. Like if a permit holder was to sue, you know, they can be awarded, you know, their attorney fees. If we denied somebody a permit that they took us to court, you know, but I've never been sued, you know, so therefore we've never lost and never had to pay anything out that way, so that's a great thing, but, you know, that's
I
where
wouldn't
part
think
of
a
that.
case like that would, you know, 30 to 50 grand probably,
Oh, yeah, and probably not even that,
yeah.
yeah.
So there's still a lot of money in there, and you really, what can you spend it on?
Cabinets, desks, you know, we are very limited, I'm with you,
Candy?
yeah, maybe we could buy her a car or something, huh?
Yeah,
No, it's tough, I'm with you,
yeah.
you know.
I mean, that'd be a great one for the body scanner if you could figure out how to do it.
This is the guideline, statute guideline. I should have that in
You
my
know?
file.
Yeah.
Want me to-
It's very, well, it's very specific to it's gotta be gun permit related. So,
Yeah, it's gotta be,
Well, could the
Scanner be looking
scanner
for.
be used for guns as well as fentanyl?
I wish. Yeah, hiding a gun, yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question
Yes.
now that we're on restricted funds? I got it up in front of me here. For conceal and carry, there's 184,000 in that.
Yeah, that's
What's
what-
that for?
That's what
Oh, that's
Dave
what,
was just
That's the
talking
gun
Okay.
permit money.
I was busy looking, I didn't pay attention. Okay.
yeah, and it's very limited on what you can use it on that, you know, outside of a potential lawsuit that you'd need some there for, it's just gonna keep growing. Cause
Okay.
he
Huh.
really, there's nothing you can spend it on that, so it just seems kinda foolish not to figure out how the state could expand your use of that.
And in all honesty, our gun permit fees that I charge are half of what most counties charge. So you can imagine what that fund would be if we were $100. You know, we only charge $50.
I'd be curious next time you go to your sheriff association meetings, I'm gonna ask that question, how
Yeah.
everybody else is.
It's funny, cause I don't have any other, it doesn't come up. It really
Yeah.
doesn't. So nobody is, and that's probably why nobody's lobbied for it. 'Cause
I
nobody-
noticed that early, you know, when I first took this job, and
Yeah.
it's like,
I'm assuming the sheriffs wouldn't wanna lobby too much for fear of losing
yeah,
it to be, you know, a sheriff-only thing.
Yeah.
You know, for one, you know, but, yeah, it has never come up in my 12 years going to our meetings and stuff, so. All right, so just so you know, for the STS, that's where a lot of that increase is coming from. But if we can make that change, which was recommended, that would actually, clear that up, quite a bit. And that would be it for big increases that jumped out at me. If there's something anything else that any of you had, I would be glad to at least try to answer them for you.
With the number of prisoners, is it still pretty heavily occupied with locals?
Actually, a lot of our people are not really locals. A lot of our DUIs, for example, are people traveling through our county, believe it or not. I mean, they're in the general area, but as far as being Hubbard County residents, yeah, I would say, I don't even know if half of them are local people, yeah.
But we pay, whenever they come through Hubbard County and they have an offense, we pay for it, then it's not,
Oh, yeah, they're,
okay,
yep. If we house for somebody else, then they pay,
okay.
but otherwise, yeah, it's on our dime. Yep.
It's probably not fair to ask now, but you know what our trending per day is right now?
Oh, our average daily population?
Yeah, ADP.
I'm gonna guess, I look at our in custody list and we've been up, in the mid seventies, which is really a pretty good, load for the jail. And then we'll be down to the probably mid fifties. So I would say in that 60-ish, mark is a pretty good average, which is,
Is it leaving any room for boarding a prisoner revenue?
yeah, we have done some, but the problem is, you'll get some, and I talked to Joe about this, cause
Yep.
I'm the same way, hey, can we, get some outside inmates, but as soon as you do that, then all of a sudden our numbers go up and we got no place to put them. And the other part of the problem is, the type of inmates, that's the best way to explain it, the classification, the type of inmates that others wanna get rid of, that pod of ours is already full. If they wanted to give us, say, females, for example, we have room to take females, but not everybody,
Yep.
is full on in their female wing.
Yep.
So, it kinda hurts that way,
So Corey, I had a phone call from a restaurant owner wondering, now since August 1st, because of the marijuana, what kind of perimeters they can put around restricting how close they can get to the building. So how will your office handle, let's say this person called and said, I have someone smoking right outside the door and I can't get rid of them.
Well, trespassing, that's how we would handle that, because as a business owner or a private, citizen, at your home, you have a right to have control over your property,
Because
even.
the state doesn't come out with so many feet from the door. And
No,
and
but-
Ted said, the Clean Air Act is about the closest thing he could find to,
Yep, and you can't smoke in a public place.
right.
Even cigarettes, you're not supposed to smoke in a
Right.
public place, which is violated all the time, when we have ashtrays in front of the front doors of places, that's defeating the purpose of it, because you're not supposed to smoke there. And the marijuana thing would be no different, so, yeah, as a restaurant owner, ask them to leave. If they refuse, it's trespassing and they can go to jail. So that would be the proper way to handle that. Yep.
Anything else?
Nope, not, from me.
Well, this is the first draft. We'll be looking at it again, I'm sure.
All right, sounds good. Thank you much.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, I know.
IT department.
All right.
Go with this. Good morning,
Welcome
guys.
to the budget cycle.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Mine is probably a little bit, not quite as much as Corey's, but just a couple things right off the bat here. Some of this kind of got changed a little bit. There was, as you probably saw, for the travels and meals, the 22,000, that was actually training. There was no training item I don't know if Rob, he never had any training in there on it, so that was kind of put in there, and then I pulled it out later, and that's up there for the, as you'll see, the train under 6186, the 8,000.
Oh, okay, so take out the 6331?
Nope, that's gonna be 5,100 for travel and meals, and that kind of coincides with the training and stuff like that, that's on there. And that is one whole, I think that's kind of been, we've been a little bit more on getting some of that training kind of brought up and some of that might require a little more travel and meals and stuff, so that's where that's kind of been put in there. In the past, it hasn't been any.
So Fred, for the 6186, you're putting in 8,000, and then for the 6331, you're changing that from 22,000 to 5,100?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
What's a 6186 again?
There hadn't been training before.
Yeah, we're adding 8.
Adding 8 there and then decreasing on the 6331 to 5,100.
Got it.
Yeah, I sent some of those numbers that was kind of late on that there, but, and then also, I just kind of been, some of the budget, there was some things, you'll see the 13 on the 6245. There's never been, as far as membership and dues on that there. A lot of the 13,000 that's there now, that was actually, I think he just incorporated everything in the MNCCC. They're all the MNCCC dues. It's the same thing we've paid in the past. I just put it up into now being categories under dues and fees. I don't know if that's something, just kind of, that way kind of track that a little bit better on how those are changing. It's not changing with like all the software maintenance that we get from MNCCC and stuff. And so, I mean, then also going down into 62, 65, I know it kind of seems a little, kind of been moving some things that shouldn't be, some of it just got kind of grouped in on some of the stuff, and trying to find some of the information that, how Rob had did it before too, is some of that information wasn't available on his stuff, so.
So what did you take that out of then if you're separating it out?
I took it out of 62, 65.
Okay,
And as you can see, 62, 65, actually, it looks like it went up on there.
yep,
And part of that increase is Tyler increased their rates by almost, I think, went from 66 up to 60, just under 70,000 on that there. And so that was an increase on there. Also in that same number is, we'll no longer have our AS 400 on site. We're gonna be paying for off-site of that there. And in doing that, we won't have the upgrade fee for the, every year and stuff like that, or the maintenance fee on that there, but we will have a fee to support that and stuff, and that their fee went up. If you kind of put it all together, it kind of probably went up by about $4,000 a year to have that off-site, but now we won't have to maintain it here, and stuff like that, so.
it's the AS 400, you only look back, right? You're not putting anything on there now?
Nope, we're not putting anything more on it, it's just all of our IFS stuff, all of our,
Before Tyler, right?
yep.
Yep,
Yep.
okay.
So that'll be off-site. And also some of that number changed, 'cause I did move some stuff up into there. That should have been support and maintenance. And so, and I can, let me just go over that there. 62, 65. Yeah, also, we will be looking at doing some stuff with ISC and the AP workflow and stuff like that there. There'll be a $2,000 maintenance fee on that, and that'll be moving some of that stuff off of, in order to make basically kind of paperless for Kay's department and be able to keep that all on digital now and stuff. So I did incorporate that price in here as far as the yearly maintenance on that and stuff. Not the upfront cost, we'll be doing that this year. And then, of course, the CPS, and then, of course, there was increases on all of MNCCC stuff. Most of the stuff, it looks like, other than Tyler, increased by 3%, something like that. So that was part of the increases there, too. And also, as our web hosting went up just a little bit, because of the new website that's coming, just kind of planning for that. It's a couple $1,000s more there, just based on, because they kind of broke it out into 4 years. So that was that one. And then if you go to 6285, the 52,370, that's gonna actually decrease by 3,900. Some of our Adobe stuff that I'm moving that down into the software part of it. So you'll see down in software, the 6626. That's where the 3,900 will go down into there.
So it'll be into $3,900 increase.
$3,900 increase, and then that same number, that 27,500, that's actually gonna increase by, that should actually be 37,500. I kind of went off of what last year's was, and kind of looking at the year before and stuff, and that's our pricing. Most of that is our Microsoft 365 for a new employee, somebody comes on, giving them a Microsoft Office 365 account. And that's for our G1 licenses, and they've just been growing. We went from 275 to, we're 307 now, and this is, for next year, just allocating up to 310. And it looks like we might be able to recover some of those back. So I'm basically off of what we have now, looking at having 3 to 4 more off of the new employees. That's kind of based off of what we're gonna have here after these new employees come on and stuff. And then looks like we might be able to recoup some of those, 5 or 6 of them. I was just looking at I think we have some city people that have a city email address or a state email address, and then they also have our county email address. I don't know why they had that, I don't know. But Zach and I were just talking about this morning that they don't need to have both, so they wouldn't have to have our county one. So that'll be about 5 that we recover back from that. And those are right around $116 a piece, so that a year. And so we should be able, we should be able to recover those. But that number, I grabbed off of what I saw we'd kind of been doing the last couple of years and stuff like that. And then I went back to what we currently have, and it's actually $10,000 higher. So that number would actually be the 37.5 plus the 3,900. And I'll get those to Kay and that they're changed on there. And then you probably see, under the servers, the 6629, that's probably one of the biggest increases. That's gonna be to upgrade our Nimble storage, and that basically is our storage for everything in the county. That's been growing. We did, I think with the attorney's office, we purchased one about 2 years ago on that one. It was a big upgrade for a lot of storage and stuff out there, and we almost ate up half of that. And what's happening is the body cam footage, any of that footage that they want for a trial and stuff, we have to store that. All the other body cam footage, of course, that gets uploaded into the cloud and stuff. But if all of a sudden they want, they have a trial on that there, we bring that down, then we have to store that. And of course, that storage has been it's growing astronomically on that there. It's crazy to see. I think we're at 900 gig or something like that, and now we're at like 11 terabits. That's over 2 years. It's just unbelievable. So that would be that is coming due next year. It'll be out of warranty, and so that would be I think it had a 5-year warranty on it, and so that would be changing that out. And that is something that we could maintain, but then it would be out of warranty, anything that came up on it and stuff like that. And they do have a lot of older drives that, we've already had a couple of them start failing that we've had to replace and stuff like that. So that would be to replace that system, and now that would be upgraded to it. So that's the cost for the 60,000 would upgrade all that storage for us.
And then would that be under warranty then?
Then that would be under warranty, and that would be a 5-year warranty.
Okay.
Yep, maintain everything. So we shouldn't have that cost for that that storage. And this year we'll be upgrading the host, which basically is all of our servers that kind of drive that, and was already in this year's budget. That will be something that was like 8,000 or something. So we shouldn't have that should be the only cost there.
And equipment costs went way down,
And equipment cost.
6623.
Yeah, and then equipment cost, that number went down, And then our hardware number went up for PCs.
Oh, so you're just making it,
Yeah, the equipment cost is more like in our server room, if kind of the way that was done here. Let me just go back to that. So yeah, the equipment cost was more like our stuff in our server room, UPSs, switches. We had that in this year's budget for basically to have backup switches and stuff like that there. Our switches come under, I think that's in 2025 that we'll have to look at probably doing some stuff with our network, more of the switches, stuff, they're still under warranty till then. So and then we did the Veeam stuff this year. Basically in that there, we have, that's a lot, the 37,000 is our contract for all of our copiers and everything. Instead of paying for those, we're basically leasing them. So that's for leasing for all of our copiers, all the toner and stuff like that, the cost of that going. So that's why that went down. But then the equipment purchases, I talked to Jeff about this. The hardware purchases are for next year, our 5 years replacement cost on all of our, basically our standard desktops and stuff like that. Those, we have, I think there's like 100 that need to be replaced to stay under that stay at that 5 year. So we're looking at replacing about 36 of them next year, and then kind of working into, the rest of them will kind of hold into kind of put it more towards a 7 year on some of those older ones, and then get to where we're doing it every 5 year. I don't think it's been, so that way we're doing, the cost isn't so much as far as all of a sudden, all of them need to be replaced. It's more just kind of and that number also is, we'll be looking at, in that is 12 laptops, kind of based in trying to replace some of those desktops with laptops, getting more to so some of these people, instead of having a desktop, they'll have a docking station with a laptop for any community, that way they can do video conferencing and stuff like that there. So that's where that cost is on that there. It's, a lot of it's just upgrading equipment, trying to get into that 5 year for desktops and 3 years for laptops, kind of staying in there. So that's why that number kind of went up.
Is 3 years for laptops kind of a low number?
It's kind of typical.
Is it?
Yeah. We can extend that too. That's kind of the typical warranty that they're under. It's a 3 year warranty. That's kind of why we're doing it. Desktops, they kind of push a little bit more. And the reason is laptops are thrown around and stuff like that, so they don't,
So you go more by warranty rather than like software on it?
Yep. Yeah,
How
we
it
could,
come
and
out
that's
then?
something that we can push it out. The thing is, I mean, we're kind of seeing right now, I mean, somewhere in that 3 to 5 years, you're seeing where some of that either, and now it's probably not as quite as it probably has been in the past, but technology has gone, I mean, computers have, so the software haven't been able to even keep up with some of the software that they've had to drive and stuff like that on just the standard, laptops and stuff like that there. We're now, the processing speed and stuff like that there, everything's kind of been staying, not jumping from, for example, all of a sudden it was, i3, i5, and i7, there was such a jump in how those operated, where now it's kind of, they've kind of met the demand of the software, so you don't have quite that jump to where you have to have the best processor to run that software. The software hasn't we've kind of gotten to that point where it can handle it. So, but 3 years, we're kind of staying with the warranty part of it. So, I mean, that way, in 3 years, if something happens, we just basically bring it in, we send it back, and it's typical across, I think, most companies, and I think talking to a couple of the other counties and stuff, that's what they run too, is a 3 and 5 year on that there. And I suppose, like I said, some of the standard desktops and stuff, I think some are like Jed was saying, are 8, 9 years old out there, and we have some really old ones. And that's something that we kind of will continue to do, is put some of those ones that we take in, we'll kind of replace those out with some of these older ones, really older ones that are out there too. So we'll take a 5 year and replace it kind of with a 9 year if we have to, if it's not one of the ones that are, those get replaced first, but if it's one that's going like 6 years old, then it's, we are kind of moving it around, and that's what we're doing today as of right now too. If we replace one and that one there, we could put out, like, for example, like at the North Transfer Station, wherever, you know, they don't use it very often, but they use it mainly for the time cards and stuff like that there. We'll put a newer used one out there instead of an older one trying to use that stuff. So that's kind of what we've been doing and on that there.
So I'm gonna throw this question out, Jeff, Fred, but Kay was here. So whoever wants to answer it. So a few years back, we were talking about how every department kind of had their own copier and their own contract, and then we were gonna move towards centralizing copiers and contracts. Is this part, has that been done as the contracts are expiring?
Yeah, the contract for the copiers was done 2 years ago. It was done pretty much right after I got here, and that's been
Okay.
centralized.
Okay,
So a couple of things that, just to reiterate what Fred has said, is we're identifying standard specifications for desktops and workstations, whether they be laptop, docking station, or actual desktop. I'm trying to minimize that. And we're trying to minimize the number of CPUs out there, right? So right now, when I got here, everybody had a desktop and a laptop. And now we're trying to move to people having laptops with docking stations so we can reduce the number of CPUs we have. We still have way more CPUs than we have staff. So we're just trying to figure out how to do that and then come up with a regular rotating schedule on replacing those, because we don't want this budget to be 600 one year and $1.5 million next year and 600. We want this to roll over a period of time. Some contracts are 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, so you kind of have to estimate a little bit in between and then fill in with your hardware replacements and we're also coordinating and centralizing a lot of the software licensing. If it's for more than one department, it's probably gonna be paid out of IT. If it's specifically for a department, it might be directly paid by them. And then the line in the memberships, you see the breakout on there, that's a better detail. A couple of you had mentioned we should be making sure that we're joining MinKitla with this group. Well, we're doing that, so it comes with a cost, but it also comes with the opportunity to travel and learn from other counties, what they're doing and how they're doing it. So some of this is coming up as advice from other counties on how they're organizing that work. And then generally, you'll see, we're right in the ballpark, 807, 760, 837. That's kind of a straight line for this department's support. And we've been operating with the same staffing since '22.
To reiterate, kind of what Jeff's talking about too is, as we're going, and that's kind of what we're doing now, and we're working with Kay's department on getting capital assets, kind of to do a little better tracking on some of these assets and stuff out there, but getting rid of the two CPUs per person. I mean, and when COVID hit, it was kind of a mad scramble from what I understand, talking to the guys. I mean, they were handing out laptops to go home. Well, they all had laptops. Well, their desktop still stayed there. So they came back, set their laptop up on the desk, and they still had their laptop, still had their desktop, and then came to get their laptop, and there was something with, they kind of still have that. So we're kind of going through and recouping that, and that'll change too, from going from, like I said, 2 CPUs to 1 CPU to each person. And now all of a sudden we won't have quite as much on that 3-year rotation and 5-year rotation, we won't have as many to do as we are, As we're doing that now, we're looking at, hey, this desktop, that person has a laptop, well, we're not gonna replace his desktop. It'll be the laptop that's a year old, so that desktop then can be, if it's 7 years old, we'll probably retire it and stuff like that there. Or look if there's a place where someone has a 10-year-old one or whatever, or the one that's not working, we can put that one in there. So, stuff like that. And then also too, like Jeff was saying, like Eric's department, they're looking at some tablets, I guess they got some new thing that they're doing or whatever. Well, he was looking at putting in his budget, and he's like, well, can we just keep this in the IT budget? And that was for 4 iPad Pros. It comes to about $5,400. And he's like, can I just keep it, can the IT department take care of those, or should we do it or whatever? And he's like, typically we've kind of want the IT department, so that is in this budget also, instead of his budget, so. And that's like some of the stuff like with Tyler too, last year, like talking to Maria, you know, we just take the full brunt of the Tyler out of the IT budget. It kind of gets used across all the departments. It's the software, so we've been paying for that. Like this year, that's what we kind of paid for. I think the last, pretty much every year that looking back for the last 2-3 years, we've been paying for that. So it's a lot of those things in here, and that, of course, that number's in that big software support and maintenance. Most of that is software for multiple, you know, departments and stuff like that that we all use with the, and stuff like that. So, is there anything else here that on that was pretty much the big changes, other than computer repairs and maintenance. That number's kind of been up there around that 30, 28, 8. I'm looking at this year. We probably are gonna get close to that 25 to 28,000, but we've been doing a lot of that's will change a little bit with the training and stuff like that too, with what we have down there. A lot of that's been, you know, like a lot of our firewall support and stuff like that there, especially with this IP change and stuff like that. We've done a lot of that ourselves. I mean, we've contracted a lot of that out, and a lot of that with just a little bit of training, we can do a lot of that. We wouldn't have to contact somebody at $200 some an hour to come in and do some of that work for us. So hopefully we'll change that, and that's why I estimated about 20,000. We don't have a lot of those things going on, no big changes like that. So that number is down a little bit too. So. And it's been a fun budget to put together, based on not a lot of, some of the information too, looking for it from old information, trying to find that out too and stuff. And I'm sure in here there's some contracts, some of this year too, I found some of the contracts are 2025, and some of them I'm not sure, maybe that number might pop in here, but it would be like for $2,000-3,000, something like that. So I kind of, some of that there is in miscellaneous. I think I have a couple thousand in some different miscellaneous in case some contract prices pop up or something. So that I couldn't find, or not sure when those are due, a 3 year or something like that. So, so I'll get with Kay and get those numbers changed and stuff on there. So,
Okay, thank you, Fred.
all right, thank you guys.
All right, Corey, you're up next.
Well, good morning. First time doing this, so let me know if I'm doing something wrong. I'll go through the forfeited land first, the NRM. The big change is the forfeited land sales. Right now we have a 0 in there for the Supreme Court case that's going on. Not much is known yet what we're going to be doing in the next year. So the Minnesota Department of Revenue suggests that we hold off on land sales till the legislation has gone through next summer. So right now that has a 0. So that's a big change on this budget, on the NRM part of it. Timber sales are the same. Pretty much everything's the same, except for that forfeited land sale. We do plan on purchasing a UTV with tracks. The one we have is pretty much held together with duct tape, so that's one big purchase that we hope to make next year. It's about $20,000, or it's about $40,000, so they're not cheap. $40,000 for a UTV with tracks, so that number is going to be about $20,000 different than what was budgeted last year on equipment purchases. The expenses are going to be a little lower just because we're not transferring out, apportioning as much as we would with the tax forfeit land sales. 53% of the NRM revenue after expenses is going to be going to the county, the township, cities, and schools. 20% will be going to apportioned to parks, and 27% will be apportioned to forest development, and that that can be up to 30%, but we're just working with 27% this year. So that's pretty much it for the forfeited land, the NRM budget, so,
Corey, I got a question.
yeah,
The forfeited property, you know, that you had just talked about,
yep.
what's involved in the dollar figures? You know, like last year's budgeted, 426.
Yeah, so right now, year to date, it's $0, so it's,
Well,
I mean,
what does that money buy you?
so this is, it's a big deal. It goes to our revenue, which gets apportioned to parks, schools, townships, and the county. So, it's a big deal. If we lose that, we have, what is it? Look at the parks quick. So right now, in our parks account, cash account, we have $481,234. If we lose this forfeited land money, I'd say 5 or 10 years, that cash account in the parks account is pretty much gone. So, it's gonna be tough if we lose the ability to, remain them funds from the parks, the tax forfeit sales. So, it's a big deal. So hopefully we get the best turnout for that.
But if I remember right, the ruling was only if it was sold for more than what is owed, and a lot of the properties are sold for less than what is owed, correct?
Yeah, so the question is now is, will they get the money from what was assessed, or will they get it from what the property was sold at? So they don't really know yet. There's a lot of questions out there, but they're thinking whatever the county put into cleaning up the property and getting it in shape to sell it, whatever money the county spends, that'll get taken off the amount that's made. So, yep. So we're gonna have to do a lot more documenting if it does come to that, and making sure we know our time.
Isn't that generally the case? I mean, you never clear bonus money off.
No, most of the time, I don't think.
It's in your expense, so
Yep.
as long as you can cover that.
But there are a couple properties.
Yeah, yes
That's
and
the
no.
question.
Yes, we've always encumbered the expense. It's always shown up in the expenditure lines. But the things that aren't clear is how far back are we looking? You know, when did this forfeit, and how far back do we have to go to capture that, and how far back are we gonna have to pay that back, and are we paying it back out of course, or are we paying it back when it's requested? None of this has been cleared up. So for this point, I mean, I've got Mary from HLDC saying there's TFL properties in the town that people wanna develop. Can you sell them to me? Nope.
Yep.
At this point, I wouldn't expend any money on them until you get.
No.
Because we don't have any answers.
The
So-
Department of Revenue said if we do sell them, make sure we put the money in a escrow account and don't spend any of it till this Supreme Court case is finalized.
So it's a challenge, and right now it's really hard to put anything in that revenue line, because if any excess revenue goes back, there's never gonna be a number in that line again. We're gonna show that as another source of revenue offset by expenses, and then any net would be being paid out someplace else, not split up between the city, the county, and the schools.
So if we've removed any projected revenue, I imagine you removed any projected expenses you would have had on to get those properties.
Yep,
sold.
exactly. Yep,
So-
we did. So yeah, it'll be a big thing. It's all up in the air right now, but
So if I remember right, Minnesota's one of, I believe it was 24 states that did this. So how did the other states handle this that are not?
Michigan did the same thing. They gave the forfeited landowner a letter and said you have to come back within a year to regain any funds. So yeah, I don't know exactly what Michigan, what they did totally, but they did something that they think was smart, and
But they
No,
didn't go
we-
back for years and years, did they?
no, I think they went back to 2013, or it's kind of the similar thing as Tyler versus Hennepin. yeah, there's a lot of questions and, not, you know, not much is getting answered until next legislative session, so.
Corey, I have one question. I'm looking at timber permits, and that reminded me of a conversation I had probably a couple months ago with a logger in the barber shop. That's literally where it was.
Okay, sure.
Rod Hooker, I think it was.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, he's one of our
Okay.
main loggers, I guess. so.
Yeah, but anyways, he was saying that he thought our rotation period can be reduced some. That would increase revenue, and it would not affect, you know, all of our management goals, you know, aesthetics.
Sure, yep.
Logging and all that. Do you think that would be a?
So we are working on that older timber to, you know, bring it down to appropriate ages. But there's so much old timber out there right now, and with our management plan, if you cut all that old timber, we're not gonna have anything left in 30 years, so. We are working on the older stuff, we're bringing that number down, and I think it's gonna be, yeah, it'll make everybody happy.
What would be your goal on rotation for aspen?
My goal is to, after 55.
55?
Yep, I'd say that's a good age to start looking at it. And we do have, there's a lot of 70-plus-year-old aspen out there, and
That's what I was thinking.
it's falling apart, and we need to take care of it, so, while following the management goals.
Before it dies on its own?
Yeah, or gets blown over. So, yeah, so we're working on it, and it'll be good.
In fact, he invited any of us commissioners if you want to go tour one of his logging operations.
Sure, yep. Yeah, Rod's got a pretty,
Well, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah,
I
would you like
do
to?
that. Absolutely.
Okay, I'll have to give him a call if
Okay.
any of you's
Yeah.
got interest in it. Okay.
just don't make it after a day that rains 2 inches of rain, so. Might find some ruts. No, I'm just kidding.
When was the last time we had 2 inches of rain in one day?
Yeah, I know, we could use that, we could really use that.
Sunday.
Oh, no.
It was pretty spotty.
11
I don't,
miles.
Yeah, it must have been really spotty, yeah.
but anyways, that's the forfeited land. I'll move on to the forest development. Like I said, 27% of the revenue from forfeited land and timber sales is gonna go into forest development. That includes, you know, regeneration and road maintenance and county, we pay this county surveyor to help us out doing surveys. That's 25,000. That's same as last year, so no change there. The request went up to 178, yeah, on this. It went up a little bit higher than last year just because the planting and bud capping and all that has gone up a little bit, so the request has gone up a little bit from last year. But yeah, everything's the same on that, otherwise. The county, I'll move on to the county Forest Access Road Fund. We're planning on budgeting or receiving 47,000 from the gas tax that we get from the state, and that's 47,000, and we plan to put that back into road grading and gravel and reconstruction of our forest roads. The next one I'll do in lieu of taxes, the PILT payments. So I was told that PILT payments are going up an extra $1, I believe, an acre. Or, it might not be $1, but I know they're going up
I think it is.
a little bit per acre. So we're still planning on the revenue of 88,000, and from this, membership dues and fees come out of, and we pay the county attorney $5,000 to help us with questions and help us, you know, if we ask about tax forfeit land sales, well, that's what that comes out of. And building cleanup, that's 10,000, so that has to do with the tax forfeited land also, so. Pretty similar to last year, no big changes. Move on to the environmental trust fund. So I just kind of learned about this. This is from when the cabin sold, or the state sold cabins, and the county was given $400,000 to put into a trust fund. And the interest that comes off this $4,000, we can use,
We didn't get a paper on that, did we?
I don't see one either.
Okay,
No, you didn't. I'm sorry. It's 82. It's relatively incidental.
okay.
Yeah,
Expenditure- Revenue budget is 7,000, expenditure budget at 2,500.
yep, so it's the same as last year, no big deal. It pays for pesticides, pesticide licenses, so. Then we'll move on to parks. The busy one. So the number is 130,000, I believe, in the packets you have, but we worked some numbers, and we plan on selling a couple small pieces of equipment in the tax forfeited budget. So the number's really gonna be apportioned as $132,075, $132,75 instead of 130,000. Salaries and wages are pretty much the same. Salaries went up a little bit for step increases. Personnel is going to be the same. We're going to keep our 2 seasonals next year along with our full-time position. Ferris Park, that's one jumping a little bit, that $5,000 more than last year, just because we're planning on building a frisbee golf course there. And then the big equipment purchases, we're looking at purchasing a new mower to replace one of the old worn out zero-turn mowers. It's about 15 years old, and another piece of machine that's held together with duct tape pretty much. So we put $20,000 in for equipment purchases for that mower, zero-turn commercial mower. And this $250,000 is for that Deep Lake Park grant, or not grant, but the county portion put towards.
It's the match.
Yeah, the match, yep.
And we won't spend it this year, so we'll carry it over, so we'll factor it out of how it's impacting the net and the levy need for next year, so.
Okay.
We're showing it carried over, but I gotta back it out in the end, so it's not included in the levy calculation.
Sure.
When do you expect the grant?
November or December, we're supposed to hear, so. And then Friday, I'm meeting out there with Joe from the Greater Minnesota Trails and the people who give the grant. We're meeting there Friday to do a site tour. So I'm looking forward to sprucing up the trails a little bit for them to give them a tour around. So without the Deep Lake, we're at $59,732 in expenses after the revenue, and if we do spend that, it'll have to come out of our park bank account, which, like I said, it's at $481,234, and if we lose that tax forfeited land sale, that park bank account could go down pretty quick. So it's just something that we're all thinking about. And that's it for all of the natural resource parks budget.
getting back to my question about the states that did it differently, are they just levying for dollars then? That this fund covers? Or
Well,
how are they handling
I
their
have no idea
expenses?
how they're handling it or how counties are gonna handle it, but with that, if that source of revenue goes away, then we'll have to determine what other source of revenue is appropriated, and levy's probably the one that, as long as the timber management doesn't go away, and the revenues from that stay, then it's limiting the damage. But, you know, last year we increased that number from 180 to 425, said we'll just sell some prime properties. Well, here's the deal, if that parcel tax forfeited 10 years ago at $40,000 worth of value, we turn around and sell it for $200,000 worth of value. They haven't resolved,
Right.
what are they getting? Are they getting the net of the 40,000 they lost it at, or are they getting the net of today's value and the sale price?
So we don't know how far back they'll go.
No.
We don't know, well, I don't know if they're gonna go back before 2013, but they certainly haven't told us, is that the forfeited value or the present value? You know, I mean, if that, like I said, if that was a lot and it was $20,000 and they just let it go, and now we turn around and sell it because the market's different and the demand is different, you know, what are they getting? Are they getting the value on what they forfeited? Or are they getting the value on the proceed of the sale 10 years later? Nothing's clear about that.
It doesn't make any sense, because, I mean, how do you get value on something you no longer owned?
Yeah.
Because truthfully, when we're holding it for the state, we're just a custody of it. And it's undetermined who we're holding that in custody for.
Yeah.
So they're asking the legislature to define it? Because to me, it sounds like it's gonna end up in the courts again.
Well, it's in the court, and its decision is there. The legislature will have to try to craft legislation that meets the guidelines issued by the Supreme Court, and then it will probably be tested. It'll probably go back and forth for a period of time. Minnesota was one of 12 or 13 states that had this. The other states already had it in place that if you tax forfeited and there was value in it, you would get that back. So that's
okay.
So that the basic answer to the question is, you know, the seizure of property, the Bill
So
of
did
Rights
you
relative
say-
to seizure of property. Can you do that without compensation?
Did you say the other states do the tax forfeited value?
The others,
They give that back?
the other states, yes.
So then they would keep the increase?
I'm not sure how, well, they would do it at the time, so they would, but they wouldn't, so if it was forfeited in 13, and it was forfeited at $20,000 worth of value, and you sold it at $20,000, and you had this much cost, well, you do that now. Now, here's the problem, we've had some of those parcels for 10 years, and the value has changed,
Right.
and we've been given no direction on what that looks like.
If there's no equity in those parcels at the time they're forfeited, it should be done.
It should be, and that's, again, that's the legislation we don't have.
Yeah.
When Corey's talking about better record keeping, we have to have the record keeping to determine, you know, there should probably be a settlement at some point and a process for settlement at some point relative to the forfeiture of properties to be able to satisfy and determine that. Because it would make sense. And if it happened today and we had a settlement, we paid it out, we were good, and we hold the property, now we own the property, we're not holding it in custody. 10 years later, we sell it at value, well, then we're good. Right, we don't have that settlement process yet.
The scary part for us is if it's a piece of land that's got timber on it and you harvest timber on it sometime in the 10 years and then sell
then-
it, do you have to give them the timber?
Yeah,
harvest
exactly,
money?
the proceeds
Yep.
from the tip.
Yep, so there's a
Profit
lot,
anyhow?
there's a lot undetermined.
There is, so,
Is that 10 years of statute of limitations that's already on the books?
No, that's just kind of a number people are thinking about.
And I'm just wondering if the Supreme Court gave enough guidance on statute of limitation, because
None.
the legislature can say, okay, we're gonna make it 10 years, and then that gets challenged.
Yes, any of those are possible. No, there was not good guidance. The decision was an emotional appeal, and we're in a bad situation as a result of that. Because in this situation, I don't know that individual actually had any value left after they had expenses.
Then if there's a statute of limitation, you know, you can see government just holding on to it long enough to meet that requirement, and then, so that's not always necessarily the right
Yep.
answer either.
yep, yeah. No, I'm hoping to be positive and hope things work out. And there's I think Chip had this, that 426,000 budgeted for 23 because there's a nice lot on Cavacona and Boulder Lake. So, I mean, the county could come out pretty good and help the parks and schools and towns and,
We were counting on that.
yeah, so we're hoping things work out.
So the question is, you know, with property values being up and high, should we still be considering selling it and putting it in escrow rather than waiting? I mean, what's the
Yeah.
difference? If the
Yeah,
property
that's,
values are high and you stand to gain more by
Mhm.
doing it now, you just can't use the money.
Yep. And the question is, yeah, will it come off the assessed value or the value that you sell it, that you sell the property for? So, yeah,
That's a possibility, but I wouldn't recommend selling anything until we've documented the cost we have against all of our TFL properties.
Yep. And people that are selling are getting, lawsuits coming at them right away. So, that's another thing to think about is,
Yeah, and if the prices unexpectedly jump even further, we'd be on the hook for that amount.
mhm.
And what about parcels that we've had for over 10 years? I mean,
10 years is just picking a point in time. It's not anything that's in the rule or legislation or guidance or anything. It's just
Yep.
picking a point in time and saying, you know, before and after.
And I believe that's when the Tyler case started, was in 2013, so, yeah. I don't know, we'll see.
We'll find out in 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, I hope it doesn't take that long, but
Yeah,
hopefully by next July or August, we'll figure it out, so.
yeah. Well, thank you, Corey.
Yeah, thank you, and things are
job
going
for you.
good in the Natural Resource Department.
Yeah, good job on your first time there.
Thank you.
What's next?
So I'm just flashing this up there to suggest, Denise reminded us that we're gonna have a new commissioner. We're gonna need photos for website, we're gonna need photos for that. And then the question of whether or not we wanna update the commissioner photos in the room. I think it's probably an appropriate time to do so. So just throwing that up there as an item for consideration. And if that works, then plan on that.
Where are we gonna start hanging more pictures?
Well,
Bobby wants to know that too, so he can start planning, because Bobby was the one that planned all the layout of these evidently, so.
Okay, we got room on this wall here for a few years, maybe a decade or two.
yeah, we'll figure that out.
It's nice to have the old ones to go back and look at.
Yeah. Could put a smaller clock up and move everything in a little
You
bit.
could probably, instead of doing 2, you might be able to do 3.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
He did say the original plan he had heard about was to have on these walls underneath the window and then just around the corner here. To me, that's not an ideal place for portraits, but not my decision.
We can figure that out. So we'll probably plan on taking some pictures next work session.
Next work session.
Yep.
So we gotta be in our suits?
Yep.
So they don't have to get all cleaned up for next meeting.
Yeah, I gotta go,
For the next work session.
I gotta haul mine to the cleaners then.
Then I have a couple of general updates and would ask you for some general guidance on the work of producing and preparing a budget for you to consider in September. But I'm gonna ask a question relative to local cannabis ordinance options. Jonathan did prepare this draft of a public use ordinance. I don't know why it's not coming up. And he did say that he would be available by phone if you wanted to have a conversation about that today. I don't know if he is or he isn't, but we could certainly try him, is what he said. He was hoping to have somebody from downstairs available for this. And this schedule today with their court schedule this week, it just didn't work out. So my question to you is, do you want to try to get Jonathan on the phone and have a brief conversation about this now? Or do you want to schedule it for a time when we can have somebody from the office here in person?
I guess for me with the ordinance, I only had one question on the definitions. And then when Shar talked today, can we add anything that sets a number of feet that they have to be away from a building? If we can add something like that. Or the entrance of a building, or however it would be worded, or. Yeah, but under the definitions, I just had, now where did it go? Well, they had adult use cannabis products, and then they also had adult use cannabis products. So one talks, I guess, about what's included and what's not included is the other one. But I don't understand why cannabis flower or plant would not be considered an adult use cannabis product.
It's artificially, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, so.
I'm wondering, is it because it's not processed? Or because it's processed, it becomes a product? That was, like I said, that was my only question there. And then today when Shar mentioned about the business owner wanting to have some kind of guidance on what they could do.
I'm wondering if part of the reason is, Jeff, if you'll scroll back down
Yep, where?
to page 3, so you have 2 and 3, okay. So adult use cannabis products, D, because it talked about the webinars I've been attending, it talks about the delta and how those are synthetic. And they cannot be, they won't show up on a test, but people use them because they can get the same high. So I'm wondering if the adult use cannabis talks about the actual, that's a cannabis product, I'm guessing. But the products here includes artificial under D. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was wondering, if that's the difference, because
I'm wondering too.
one's processed and one's not.
Synthetic is, I think, actually the distinction.
Okay,
How its origin and production. If it's synthetic, it's regulated or not permitted, as opposed to organic.
okay.
It's not permitted, but it's sold everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, like I say, if we were to add something about must be 25 feet away or 50 feet away.
What's the
from
distance for smoking?
the Clean Air Indoor Act.
You know, I looked up the Clean Air Act this last week. I didn't find a specific feet, but I just read the first page, you know, the basic.
Yeah.
Because I agree with Ted, we need to add something in. I mean, so I'm thinking of the restaurant owner, you know, they're gonna wanna put up a sign.
Well, when we're talking about, I mean, down here on page, whatever this is, public space means public street or sidewalk.
Section 4, subdivision 1. Prohibited use.
So this is already covering that?
So then if this restaurant owner had a problem, technically then they could be in violation, and they could perhaps be fined up to $300.
Yeah, if they're on the sidewalk, if they're in the street, that covers almost everything in front of a door to a public space, so it should be covered here.
Okay.
As Corey mentioned, those things are already regulated, they have the opportunity to protect that access. I think that this covers, this one is the public use one that other people have adopted, and then Jonathan wrote in the limitations on the sale and the restrictions of where the sale locations could be or where a dispensary could be. So I think that he thought that this one, his email to me said that this is what he would recommend, that he thinks the board could safely consider, that anything else you would go on beyond this is probably opening us up to risk at some point. So this is his recommendation for you to read, for us to think about, And of course, the next point in the process is if you agree that this is generally what you would like to have in place. And I told him, I said, honestly, you not being here, I think the consensus is that we'd like to initiate whatever local control you think we can. I think that there's relatively uniform agreement on that. Then we would just have to go through the process of setting a public hearing and posting the notice of intent to consider this ordinance and go through the public hearing process and the adoption. So, if you think we're at that, I could coordinate that with him. If you wanna have an opportunity to talk about some of the legalese, then I would recommend that we have somebody from his office, probably Seth, available at an upcoming meeting to do that. So it might be really good to schedule them for the next meeting or the first meeting in September and just talk these things through, answer your questions about in those definitions, what's the difference between one versus the other?
And then
I
see
can
if
read
we
it and I
add
can guess, but
something.
I'd rather have Seth tell you what he thinks that means.
So if you go back down to okay, section 4, subdivision 1.
Mhm.
So if I read that and if I'm understanding the intent, the restaurant owner could say that it couldn't be smoked at all on their property. Correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, it sounds like it, yeah,
Yeah, so there wouldn't have to be a foot put in there.
good point.
No, if you own the business, you can say that's not happening, and the sidewalks in front of the business are public spaces, so that shouldn't,
And
it
you
should
think
be
the-
covered.
The parking lot would be too.
Yes,
Yeah, because this particular restaurant owner owns the parking lot.
Okay.
It's outside of city limits.
which is why the county would consider it and not, and the city of Park Rapids doing something about it doesn't change anything.
Then the only other question I have is now, does this go to the state and they okay it, or is this something we just pass and if somebody has a problem with it, they tell the state and type of a thing?
Well, the same process. There are federal statutes that everybody has to follow. The state statutes have to comply with the federal statutes, but they can restrict further. And then local jurisdictions have to follow the federal and state, and then they can restrict further from that, right? But you can't compete with a state or a federal statute. So if we put in a local ordinance and somebody wanted to make an appeal on some basis and say that's not constitutional, or say that that's not correct with the state, legislation or establishment, then they can challenge the ordinance. Jonathan's saying at this point, based on his best review, this would be enforceable
Okay.
and less likely to be challenged.
So until we pass an ordinance, a private property owner has the right to say that
Yes.
no one can,
Yep,
okay,
they can, and that's what Corey said, and Corey's right on that.
yep.
That is, private property owner can,
You didn't finish what he
Oh,
can do.
can say, this
You
is
can
not allowed
restrict
on
the
my
use, yeah,
property.
that's not allowed on my
So I'm
property.
thinking of this restaurant owner saying, you cannot do this on my property.
Okay.
Put up a sign and it should
Yeah.
cover it.
Okay, sure.
So how does this work with the part in the state's rules that the county's only allowed so many dispensaries?
this doesn't have anything to do with that. This is not touching on that. This is allowing the state.
Okay, but what about identifying the areas that it can occur? Do we have any authority on that?
But that's not going to, but why we need this right now is because effective August 1st, it is legal for people to have cannabis. That's something that's gonna happen in
Yeah.
2025.
So the sale, here, section 3, subdivision 2, says nothing within 1,000 feet of a church or 500 feet of a school or a daycare or park, and that's probably the extent of the limits that we would have.
But I'm just trying to think of, when it comes out in 2025 and they start doing dispensaries and stuff, what mechanism are we going to have that we can enforce where they're located? Or are we creating another mechanism, or should it be something that's rolled into this? Or should this be amended at some time in the
I
future?
think
I
that
don't
would
know.
be amended in the future, because right now, the state doesn't even have, they don't even have their office of cannabis established yet.
They haven't created their bureaucracy yet.
No, 300+ employees.
So Jonathan's watching and he wants to talk.
We welcome them.
And I hope this works. Can you turn the volume of the video down? Yeah, if you turn the volume of the video
I
off,
was gonna give you some backlash there, sorry about that.
we're gonna get some
I'm
feedback.
sorry I'm not there, Board. I apologize, Commissioners.
I think they can hear you now.
All right, so, having watched the meeting, I know there's some questions about definitions. And then when are we supposed to know whether the state's gonna agree with the ordinance or not? And so I'll address that question first. The statute itself, 342, that allows for the legal use of marijuana, is kind of an exception to chapter 152, which of course is a drug statute, and then 151, which has to do with edibles, Delta 8, Delta 9, which I'll deal with, which I'll talk about when we get to the definitions. But the short answer to the question on the Office of Cannabis Management, who is regulating the state's interest, both statewide but also with local restrictive license or ordinances. I've reached out to them. It should be done before the ordinance is passed, generally speaking, but they are not set up yet to do so. The first licenses are anticipated for the sale of marijuana legally are anticipated to not come out until January of 2025, which is why you're not seeing a ton of ordinances yet come out, but you will here in the next couple of months from other counties as it relates to the restriction of time, place, and manner. And so that's the 1,000 feet from a church, 500 feet from a school, daycare, et cetera, park. I feel very comfortable that once the office gets back to me, they're going to say, nope, that's in statute, you're fine. That is absolutely fine. That's what I anticipate they're going to say. They just don't have anybody to answer that question yet. I don't foresee them saying anything. Like, they could come back later and say, you got to change your ordinance to us. That's not aligned with state statute, and I could have that conversation with them, but I don't anticipate that problem. So that's the answer to that question, unless there was some follow-up question.
Nope. Thank you.
Did you, Jonathan, answer the question about the definitions under
Sure.
adult use cannabis?
So it is complicated, so I'm not surprised that there's questions regarding that. I'd be very surprised if there's not. It's a complicated question and it's a complicated answer. I'll try to make it as easy as possible. So chapter 151, Minnesota chapter 151, if you get down to the bottom of that in, I think it's 151.713 or something like that, it deals with what is legal to sell as it relates to Delta 8, Delta 9. And what they're really talking about is gummies, edibles in 151. 151, by the way, is a medical statute. That being said, it deals with gummies, that type of thing, and what level of THC it can get to before it is not protected under 151. 152, of course, makes THC itself illegal. So 151 and then 342, which is the new statute, is dealing with, is making an exception to 152, which would otherwise make it a criminal act, right? So 350 or 342 is dealing with marijuana, THC. They don't get into the 151 definitions very much. It's a little bit. But when you're talking about gummies that are Delta 8, Delta 9, less than 3% Delta 9 or in the Delta 8 is still illegal over, in my opinion, is still illegal over 3%. Then you're going to go into 342, and that's what that definition is talking about, is edibles are adult use cannabis if they have THC, regardless of if it's Delta 8, Delta 9, that is in them, that's not protected by 151. It is, so that definition is, but it's specifically not, let me pull up the other definitions here real quick, so I'm not just talking off the top of my head here. So it's differentiating, the definitions are differentiating the different types of regulation as regulated through state statute. So adult use cannabis, generally speaking, what we're talking about here is the marijuana plant. You can have up to 2 pounds at home, 2 ounces in public, or 2 ounces on your person, We are not talking about Delta 8, Delta 9, 3% or less. Gummies or hemp or CBD oil, none of that stuff falls under this. And so that's why it's specifically articulated as adult use cannabis products, what they are, and what they are not specifically, which is adult use cannabis products is not talking about cannabis itself. It's not talking about what actually is being allowed. It's talking about edibles, generally speaking, edibles, oils, that type of thing. So when you get down to actually what the regulations are in this particular ordinance, we're talking about adult use cannabis, not the products, generally speaking, as it relates to the public use for sure. And that we're really talking about, you can't have adult use cannabis, that marijuana itself, you can't have that in public. You can't use it in public. But that is not talking about the products themselves, which would be not marijuana, which you're talking about edibles, oils, that type of thing. Hopefully that answers that question. It's a complicated question because the definitions on all three statutes are not 100% consistent. So it's better to think about it in terms of what are we really talking about. 151 is talking about gummies, oils. 342 in this ordinance is talking about marijuana, the leafy substance. Marijuana with the addition of concentrate THC oils. There's some other stuff that is under 342. And of course, everything that doesn't fall under either of those, if it's got THC in it, it falls under 152. Sorry, complicated answer. I was trying to make it as simple as I could, and I didn't. I apologize. And I would just note again that the time, place, and manner, or the restriction on where that could be, I do think that is absolutely in line with state statute. I feel very, very strongly that that's the case. When that actually is going to become very important will be next year. So we've got a few months before that is even there, before a license is issued. You're seeing a lot of the counties go straight to regulating no public use, and that's because that became legal 8 days ago. Anything else, Jeff? I can't hear the board, but
Yep.
if you want to pass anything else.
Yep, so, I think you would hear them if they spoke, into the microphones, but,
Okay.
so is it your recommendation that this is an appropriate action for the board to move forward now, given the information that we have?
I do, based on the state statute, how it's written, who I've talked to at the state level, this ordinance is a good ordinance to have now, in my opinion. I would recommend going forward on it as written. Any further, and I know you noted this earlier, any further restriction would be something that we would have to look very, very closely at whether or not that's going to meet both what the plain wording of the new statute is. And as we all know, the state really, the purpose of that statute is to legalize marijuana up to 2 pounds, basically. And that is the purpose, and with that being the public purpose, we have to look very hard at any further restrictions than this particular draft ordinance. But this one, I do think I would recommend the board move forward with it.
So the recommendation on the agenda item that you see before you is, from Jonathan's email to me relative to this and including the copy of this. And his next statement, which I didn't include, and that was because it was for a conversation, in the event the board or any commissioner would like to restrict the sale in a manner more restrictive, I would likely advise against it,
Yep.
depending on the restriction and, what transpires in the next few months as we see that.
Right.
So,
And we'll see if the state wants to, if the state, as time goes on here, it's going to be a learning curve for the state as well. So there might be some changes to the statute itself that allows for some additional restrictions, common sense restrictions. But we're not there. Currently, the way the law is and what's in place, what is legal, what's not, this ordinance, protects the public, and it protects the public in the sense of smoking around children, smoking in public, the Clean Air Act. It's all in line with those common sense type of restrictions, which is why I would recommend going forward. I would also note, as a side note, the legislature in the new law restricted local governments in a number of different ways, of course. One of which is that the penalty for violating this particular ordinance can only be a petty misdemeanor. As Corey brought up earlier, trespass is another charge that could likely or potentially be brought in these type of cases if someone refuses to leave after initially being told to leave because of adult cannabis use. That the state statutes that are not under this ordinance will likely be tools that law enforcement will be using as well. But it's a petty misdemeanor, it's only a fine. And that's per state statute. I generally recommend misdemeanors for ordinances, but we can't in this one.
Thank you, Jonathan. You cleared up a lot of stuff for me. And this is Ted.
And we can talk, if you have additional questions on the definitions, give me a call. It really is complicated. It takes a little bit of time to walk through it all. But generally speaking, this ordinance is talking about green leafy marijuana. That's what it's talking about.
Other questions? Do you want me to put an item on the next agenda item for you to set the date for a public hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss and set the date for a public hearing pursuant to regular ordinance business.
Sounds good. Thanks, commissioners. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, he was buzzing my phone saying, I want to talk, so,
Good. Well, I'm glad you got on there.
easy enough.
That wraps up the work session?
So the questions that I have relative to the rest of any board direction at this point, the email that I sent out on Sunday with the background and info, identifying that this budget shows an overall increase in compensation of 10%, which is a combination of cost of living and benefits that we're anticipating. We've got confirmation that originally when we signed with Medica that it was going to be an 11.4 cap at 11.4%, 9.4 if we had enough people sign up for the restricted service provider network, and we did. So the cap is going to be reduced. We'll make an adjustment to our estimate on benefits based on that. We may have better information before we have to make a preliminary levy decision in September as well. So if that's the case, that number can only come down. We've estimated at the highest level it could be. Yeah, I just was making sure that wasn't something important. So then, the other estimates are taking a look at tax capacity. I think I explained that. We've got new tax capacity that's a result of market adjustments, right? And we didn't capture that last year, we're not intending to capture that this year. We have new value in new construction in the county assessed properties of $59 million. We had new value in the state assessed properties of $72 million, 52 at 1.25%, 72 at 2%. You get about a 3.8% increase in tax capacity on new value. What that means is the first 3.8% doesn't affect anybody except those people with new value. And then we talked about a 3% general increase across the board. Even when we plug that number in there, the tax rate goes from 33.1. Put a number in here. I'm showing it dropping down to 31.5. So the county tax rate is going down even with an increase. So the good news is that 6.8 is already the number where we're gonna work underneath. That means that we've got $624,000 to trim from the budget or to add to revenues to the budget. So when I was asking Corey about boarding of prisoners, is there $20,000 there that we haven't identified? Are there other elements that we're gonna work with? I've been communicating with Gina about the estimating for overtime and part-time work relative to 201 and 250. We'll take a look at that. We'll make all those internal adjustments and intend to have a clean copy of this to you by September 1st. I think we can do that. There's one error in here in 119 capital improvements. In 2023's budget, we showed the 1.6 set aside as current tax and 1.6 as miscellaneous expense to show it, but have it zero out, not have an impact on the levy. And unfortunately, it was entered under current tax and miscellaneous revenue, so it's double entered on revenue and not shown an expense. So the numbers on the bottom line, the total numbers, don't mean anything yet. The numbers on the bottom line, you can see easier in the levy summary that I attached to that Word document that I sent out. Now, we're also gonna be including, budget reporting for Heritage. I'll have that included or available for you before we get to September. We've kinda gotta develop that. We're having a meeting this afternoon, I think we'll talk about that. We'll have the transit numbers in here, but the transit numbers, again, are a push on levy because that's all funded by grant. But the $42,626,000 budget for the county isn't including the transit, which is $1 million, and it isn't including the enterprise fund for Heritage at this point. So it's around $50 million of operations for the county. So if we want to have general discussion, if you just want me to continue working on this, I just wanted you to know that those are the moving pieces. And my goal will be to push that number down from 6.8 to what's reasonable for a request. But the first 3.8% is new tax capacity. With a leveling off of some of the valuations, I think we're gonna see that better. Hopefully we're gonna realize the improvements on some of hopefully the housing that we're spurring and increase additional new tax capacity. So I generally wanted to put that information out there to ask if there's questions. I know as Jonathan said, if anybody has individual questions, let me know. I'm gonna be working we were gonna do social services today, but Nancy's not available. And I want her to be here. And I wanna make sure that our numbers are more in line with we don't wanna over budget. We wanna budget a lot closer, and I explained that to Brian again last week, is I'd like to be within 3% of expenditure and revenues, maybe even dial it into 2%. I hope to be 1% to 2% with the rest of our general fund budgets. So if we are at 101% of revenue and 99% of expense, then we're putting a little bit back into the fund balance every year, just a little bit, and that would be good.
So we set the preliminary on September 19th, the second
Yep.
board meeting of the month?
Yep, we have to do it by the 30th, so it'd be the second meeting of September.
I wonder, because I want to reserve some time out in my own time to really go through everything in detail. So I'd like to have it as far before the 19th as possible.
To meet with me or to meet as a group?
No, not to meet as a group, just to go through everything on my own.
Yeah,
So you want the pages up to date as
I
much
like
as possible?
up-to-date pages.
That's why I'd like to get them to
Sit
you.
in my own little office.
Yep.
And look at everything in detail. As far as ahead of the 19th as possible.
Yes, and we might even be able to move it up a week. If we can get it by August 25th, we'll do that. But we'll be making adjustments, because I'm assuming we'll have some budget conversations at next week's meeting too. Probably some of the incidental items and verifying those. If we can get it out the 18th to the 25th, we will. But I'd rather be
Accurate?
I don't have the social services one. I'm not confident that those aren't gonna change yet. So I'd like for that to be changed. I need time to get the capital stuff in there and pulled out and make the recommendations and so that it shows those things. If we, for instance, are gonna authorize the purchase of the STS truck in this year and we're gonna pull it off of there, well, we need a couple of weeks to negotiate those things. If you approve that on the 15th, I probably wouldn't have the budget report on the 18th. The 25th is possible.
Do Don't you think by September 1st would give you ample time? That
Oh,
gives
yeah,
you
yeah.
3 weeks.
In fact, yeah, I was thinking, because I'm gonna be on vacation from the 18th to the 2nd of August, so I'm not gonna do anything
September.
then. So, yeah, I was thinking sometime first
We
half
will,
of September.
we will definitely have our best possible numbers for you by September 1st.
Okay, oh, that'd fit
Yep,
perfectly for me
yep.
then.
So then you'll have 3 weeks to review.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, some of us still like to scribble on paper. So
and-
along
and-
with, on
and
my
you'll have-
saving on my computer, but I'd like it on paper.
Yep, and you'll, when I get it clean enough to
Yep.
print it again,
Yeah.
Just don't wanna set a number and adjust on the fly?
I appreciate your
It's so much easier to write my
notations on these
stuff on.
too. They're helpful.
that was actually unintentional. But I handed my copies to Denise to make copies for you today, so they came across. And that's how much of this increase is being eaten up by compensation, right? Because then that kind of tells us how much wiggle room we have. You know, we talked about the new positions that are requested, and we've got 2 in social services that we said we're gonna put back into the conversation about their budget, so we're gonna do that. We got 1 coming from the attorney's office, and then we had the additional hours in my office, and that's all we have for new positions. We had that approval for the adjustment and the complement in solid waste, and I don't know if that has been changed in here. I will ask HR to update their estimates based on our best information before we print this again to get it out to you, so that you'll see that adjustment in benefits cost. And again, that will be a number not to exceed. When we met with NIS, Bill Chakosky and his associate last week, when they give us a number, they're not gonna give us a number they don't have confidence in. So they're not gonna say, well, you're trending towards this. They'll say, this is the safe number to budget, and in 2 months, we'll have a better number for you. So I'd really like to only print this once in September, and then once just ahead of the Truth and Taxation meeting, on the times when you're gonna be, making decisions on the final budget and levy, just to reduce that. So when you get background for social services budget, when you get background for highway department budget, you'll also have room to punch those physical pages into your binders, because I can't budget on a computer screen. I can't budget with 4 screens in front of me. I need a piece of paper and a pencil to be able to process that. So that's why you have the binders. That's what you'll be getting, and by September 1st, you should have everything in there, all the numbers that we have confidence in to make that vote on September 19th.
When you put out the clean slate in September, can we also get where the reserves were
Yep.
last year?
Yep,
and
I'm gonna.
Where they are now?
I'm gonna show you the capital plan, the 5-year plan for expenditures. We're gonna take a look at the current fund balances. You're gonna get all that background that goes with that, yeah.
I
I
would be
can't-
curious, even talking about Corey's, overtime,
Mhm.
looking back 4 or 5 years between that and part-time and seeing, is this the way we've always done it and it needs to be adjusted?
Is a 5-year review of FTE.
Yeah, and you can just do that on the
Yep.
side and then come back and tell us.
Yep. So we'll identify the new staff positions. We'll have some history and background on countywide staffing. We can highlight that one because that one's changed a lot. We can highlight social services. Those are the 2 that have changed the most. The rest of them really don't. You can see that when it's a 2-page department budget.
Yeah.
You can see the detail you need in there. We'll also have, we'll have the July financials, so we'll be closer on knowing. The unfortunate thing with this is I can print 22 budget, 22 actual, 23 budget, 23 actual, and when I run this, I'll have to change that. It'll say 1 to 12, so it'll give us that information. But I still have to then take a look at the monthly financials and the year-to-date financials so that you can see the percent to budget. So you need to take a look at that other report relative to this to be able to, unless you want to be doing the math on this page, which is, again, what I.
We just like
what I
when you
scribble.
scribble it in there.
Yep, okay.
One other,
The big numbers I will.
one other point then on the commissioner's budget, because we eliminated the benefit. Have we included a change in the commissioner's budget to accommodate for that eliminated benefit and what we're gonna do if we're gonna
So we're, the
make a difference?
personnel committee is gonna be having a conversation about that. We didn't meet last week. We're gonna meet in September and bring a recommendation forward.
It's a small number, but
Yep.
make sure it's in there.
It looks like there's an accommodating figure for the salary budget. That's
Right.
what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, we'll verify what that is in there, and then we're gonna make the Personnel Committee will make a recommendation relative to, commissioner pay in association with the reduction of that benefit.
Okay. Is that it?
At least we're a lot better off than last year at this time, huh?
Oh, man.
I did not like those figures last year. I went against everything that I actually stand for. 19% increase.
But it put us in a situation to say yes to some things that are investing in the community, and it worked out that way. And like I mentioned, when we set aside that amount of money based on Enbridge, we now know that their bill went up by more than that amount for this year, so they paid all of that and more, and will continue to.
Motion to adjourn?